No one knew what lurked behind the iron doors of Hitler's private world, the truths so dangerous they could have rewritten history, but now, the veil is lifting. In the shadowed halls of the Reich Chancellery, Adolf Hitler moved like a predator among his prey. Those who observed him closely reported a man of public theatrics, but behind closed doors, he was meticulous, calculating, and obsessed with the smallest details that could bend the tide of war. Even his closest generals were unaware of the full scope of his intentions, of the secret projects he nurtured in the hidden corners of his empire. From the start of his rise to power, Hitler had cultivated not only political dominance but also a network of secrets, buried so deep that historians would spend decades piecing them together. The first of these was the intricate series of personal diaries he kept, detailed reflections not for the world but for his own eyes. They contained calculations, strategies, fears, and confessions that, if discovered at the time, might have altered alliances, battles, and the very outcome of the war. The diaries revealed an unusual fixation, Hitler's obsession with creating a perfect war scenario, one where Germany would emerge unscathed, and his own image would remain untarnished. Unlike the public image of a decisive, merciless leader, the private Hitler was plagued with doubts. He frequently reviewed contingency plans, sometimes rewriting them multiple times in a single night, the scratching of his pen echoing in the empty room. Even more startling was the revelation of his clandestine operations beyond military strategy. Hitler had a fascination with unconventional weaponry and secret research. Hidden laboratories across Germany were devoted to experimental technologies, planes with unprecedented speed, precision explosives, and chemical compounds that could paralyze an entire city. Few outside his inner circle knew of these projects, and even fewer had clearance to witness their development. But the secret that historians are most reluctant to expose is not simply Hitler's strategic or technological obsessions. It is the delicate web of personal connections, covert alliances, and private negotiations he orchestrated in silence. Foreign emissaries, spies, and loyal confidants moved through a shadow network he controlled with absolute authority. Behind each closed door, decisions were made that could have sparked early peace treaties, or total annihilation. Even those closest to Hitler sensed something intangible, a presence that was simultaneously charismatic and frightening, brilliant and unhinged. He spoke little of his private contemplations, masking them behind fiery public speeches and orchestrated propaganda. Yet the clues were always there, a trembling hand over a map, a diary left open, a sudden change in orders that left generals scrambling. What emerges from these hidden records is the realization that Hitler's influence extended far beyond the battlefield. He controlled not only armies but also the flow of information, the release of propaganda, and the psychological manipulation of entire populations. Every secret he kept was a thread in a web of deception that historians have only begun to unravel decades later. By piecing together these private documents, newly unearthed photographs, and eyewitness accounts, a portrait forms of a man far more complex, and far more dangerous, than the public ever saw. Hitler's hidden world was one of meticulous planning, unspoken threats, and a relentless desire to control not only Germany but the narrative of history itself. As we venture further into these secrets, the first shocking revelation emerges: Hitler's obsession with a master plan for Europe, one that included not only military conquest but also a covert restructuring of society, culture, and even science. It was a vision designed in secrecy, with contingencies and backdoors that even his top advisors could not fully comprehend. History remembers Hitler for the wars, the speeches, the terror, but behind the headlines, these hidden secrets may have shaped events far more profoundly than anyone realized. And in the shadows of these revelations lies a question that still chills scholars today: what might have happened if these plans had been fully executed without interruption? Inside the Führer bunker and across his private estates, Hitler's diaries chronicled the minutiae of daily decisions, many of which never reached the public eye. They described military maneuvers, but also personal reflections, frustrations, fears, and doubts that reveal a side of Hitler historians have struggled to reconcile. Some entries show him agonizing over battles that had already begun, trying to foresee every possible outcome. He wrote of the necessity of absolute loyalty and the betrayal he feared even from his closest confidants. Every command he issued publicly was filtered through layers of secrecy. Generals were often given only pieces of information, creating a deliberate fog that left them obedient, but uncertain. One diary, found decades later in a private collection, revealed Hitler's secret fascination with the perfect war, a campaign so precise, so efficient, that casualties would be minimized for Germany and yet the enemy would be utterly decimated. This was not a dream of morality, it was a calculation, cold and meticulous, showing a mind entirely focused on outcome over human cost. The diaries also reveal Hitler's private correspondence with foreign leaders and spies, some of whom were completely unknown to the historical record. Clandestine negotiations, letters written in code, and shadow meetings suggest a level of diplomacy and covert operations far beyond what is commonly taught. Historians have long debated Hitler's ability to improvise, but these documents reveal that improvisation was rare. Instead, every action was part of a broader, carefully constructed strategy, layers upon layers of contingency designed to respond to the unpredictability of war. There were also darker obsessions: Hitler's interest in supernatural theories, myths of Aryan superiority, and esoteric symbols. These were not mere eccentricities, they influenced key strategic decisions, such as targeting certain regions or populations. He believed, in his private writings, that manipulating belief systems could give Germany a psychological edge, an idea never disclosed to his generals. One of the most startling diary entries recounts a plan for a hidden victory, a scenario where even if Germany lost certain battles, the war could continue under secret operations, prolonging influence and control. It was a contingency plan so intricate that it bordered on paranoia, yet it demonstrates the depth of foresight Hitler applied in secrecy. The emotional tone of the diaries also paints a portrait of a man deeply insecure, yet outwardly confident. His writings reveal self-doubt and obsession with perception, the terror of being outmaneuvered, and a relentless drive to control both narrative and action. By reconstructing these entries alongside newly declassified documents, we begin to understand how Hitler's hidden decisions shaped critical points in the war, decisions that were often invisible to the historical record, yet carried profound consequences. Hitler's secret projects were perhaps the most astonishing aspect of his hidden world. Across Germany and occupied territories, laboratories and factories operated under layers of secrecy. Here, scientists pursued projects that ranged from experimental aircraft to chemical weapons, often under direct orders from Hitler himself. Few historians have access to the full scope of these operations, but recently uncovered files show that Hitler personally oversaw some experiments. He visited labs in disguise, examined prototypes, and gave direct instructions, sometimes ignoring the advice of his generals. The secrecy was so extreme that workers were often unaware of the broader purpose of their efforts. The stakes were monumental. A single successful innovation could have altered the course of battles, changed supply chains, or tipped alliances. Hitler's obsession with precision and perfection extended to these experiments. He demanded results that often seemed impossible, and failures were buried immediately. The secrecy surrounding these projects ensured that even post-war investigations could not trace their full impact. At the same time, covert operations included espionage networks and secret missions behind enemy lines. Hitler personally authorized high-risk undertakings, often communicating through encrypted channels that left even the Gestapo puzzled. Intelligence officers describe feeling the invisible hand of the Führer in decisions that seemed spontaneous but were meticulously pre-planned. One of the most startling revelations concerns hidden chemical and biological research. While never fully deployed, these projects reflected Hitler's willingness to explore forbidden territory, an aspect of his leadership that has been suppressed in mainstream histories. Documents suggest he believed in the possibility of decisive, almost mythic solutions, quick, radical measures to achieve victory. These secret operations and projects were not solely military, they also encompassed political manipulation, propaganda strategies, and psychological warfare. Hitler orchestrated public perception with a level of cunning that historians are only now fully grasping. His ability to manipulate not only his country but also foreign powers and rival generals relied on secrecy, timing, and misdirection. The corridors of power were darker than any battlefield, filled with whispers that could kill a man faster than a bullet. Hitler's private world, once thought impermeable, was beginning to reveal cracks. Allies he trusted implicitly were maneuvering in silence, some for personal gain, others in secret defiance of his directives. Inside the Führer bunker, tension became tangible, almost suffocating. Generals who once obeyed blindly now hesitated, sensing a threat they could neither name nor fully understand. One hidden truth historians rarely mention is the scale of betrayal that simmered beneath Hitler's authority. Certain aides maintained private correspondences with foreign intelligence, sometimes passing partial information to prevent disasters or hedge bets. Hitler, ever cautious, suspected these duplicities but could rarely prove them. The diaries describe nights of pacing, scribbling threats in the margins, and revising contingency plans multiple times, plans that included extreme measures for any perceived disloyalty. Among these covert confrontations, Hitler's obsession with secret projects intensified. Labs working on advanced aircraft prototypes were suddenly shut down and relocated under more secure protocols after he suspected spies had infiltrated. In one diary entry, he wrote, "One leak, one failure, and all is lost. I cannot allow fools to gamble with destiny." His paranoia was precise, almost surgical. Every decision carried the weight of potential apocalypse. At this moment, a minor aide discovered a collection of letters from foreign emissaries, each written in code. They described possible alliances, conditional truces, and sensitive political negotiations Hitler had initiated without his general's knowledge. For the first time, even those closest to him realized the full depth of his manipulation. He was orchestrating diplomacy and espionage in parallel, a dual engine of control no one could fully follow. Then came the personal betrayals. One trusted secretary, fearful for her life as the war turned against Germany, secretly documented daily orders and intended to pass them to Allied intelligence. These notes contained directives that, if known earlier, might have shifted battle outcomes. Hitler's reactions to betrayal were ruthless in imagination, though often delayed in execution due to his need for absolute certainty. The diary records him sitting in silence, staring at the ceiling for hours, calculating how to respond, weighing every possible consequence. Call to action, seamless integration. By the way, if you're clinging to this moment with me, make sure to hit subscribe, more waits just ahead, including revelations that would shake even the most seasoned historians. The final shocking discovery in this part is the secret network Hitler maintained outside Berlin. Safe houses, hidden couriers, and concealed caches of documents ensured that even if the city fell, his strategies could continue. Few outside his circle realized the sophistication of these arrangements, and fewer still survived to recount them. This invisible architecture of war, hidden from textbooks, now emerges as the most compelling piece of the hidden story. As the war progressed, the consequences of Hitler's hidden decisions became increasingly evident. Generals puzzled over erratic orders, some battles were lost not for lack of strategy, but because Hitler had intentionally withheld information, testing the loyalty and initiative of his subordinates. Newly uncovered documents show that entire campaigns were influenced more by secrecy than by tactical genius. One secret memo, found decades later, outlined a contingency to invade territories that historians assumed were never targeted. Hitler had calculated that surprise maneuvers could create temporary alliances and destabilize enemy command structures. These plans never came to fruition, not because of opposition, but because the operational risk was too great. Yet the existence of such plans reveals the depth of his strategic ambition, the scale of his secret thinking. Hidden chemical and biological experiments were also a part of this unseen war. Researchers documented early prototypes capable of incapacitating entire units, but Hitler chose to suspend deployment. Diaries suggest he believed these weapons were too decisive, potentially irreversible, and that their use could have provoked uncontrollable retaliation. The secrecy surrounding these projects has obscured their potential impact. Historians are only now beginning to grasp the scope of these hidden capabilities. Intelligence operations offer further insight. Hitler's secret spy networks extended into neutral countries, penetrating both political and commercial channels. dispatches from these networks show that he had foreknowledge of certain Allied movements but deliberately allowed some battles to unfold to observe responses. This manipulation of both sides of conflict underscores the dual nature of his hidden strategy: control and observation simultaneously. The human cost of secrecy was immense. Generals, soldiers, and civilians were pawns in a web they could not see. Hitler's hidden projects and covert orders were meticulously compartmentalized, ensuring plausible deniability. Yet the emotional burden on those executing orders was palpable. Diaries of aides describe the confusion, the fear, and the moral uncertainty of serving a man whose public confidence masked a private world of obsession and doubt. Perhaps most strikingly, these hidden decisions influenced post-war narratives. Certain battles, victories, and defeats were deliberately documented, or omitted, in propaganda to control perception. Hitler understood that history itself was a weapon, and his private records reflect this obsession with shaping memory, not just outcomes. Even decades later, historians are forced to confront the selective transparency imposed by these hidden operations. The culmination of these hidden impacts becomes clear in key battles where secrecy, manipulation, and controlled misinformation played decisive roles. Though often overlooked, these interventions reveal that Hitler's influence extended far beyond traditional military command. He was not merely a leader of armies, he was a conductor of an entire historical narrative, a puppeteer whose strings were invisible to all but himself. Hitler's personal fears, revealed through diaries and correspondence, were as dangerous as any battlefield weapon. He feared betrayal above all, imagining plots that sometimes never existed. He obsessed over loyalty, even orchestrating tests of his subordinates' faithfulness through fabricated scenarios. These private exercises often had real consequences, influencing promotions, punishments, and covert assignments. The Führer's obsession extended to personal legacy. Diaries reveal repeated drafts of speeches, declarations, and even memoirs, meant not for public consumption but to ensure his narrative persisted unchallenged. He documented both successes and near failures, creating a record only he could fully interpret. This duality, the man the world saw versus the man in private, highlights the depth of secrecy and psychological complexity. Hidden alliances were another facet of his private world. Hitler communicated with foreign operatives under pseudonyms, coordinated with industrialists, and maintained lines of influence in occupied territories that operated entirely outside official channels. These alliances were strategic and sometimes morally ambiguous, designed to maximize leverage while minimizing direct exposure. Only fragments of this web have survived in historical records. One particularly chilling aspect of these secrets was the level of control Hitler exerted over information flow. Even within Germany, generals often received incomplete or delayed intelligence to ensure obedience. Hitler used secrecy as a tool, not merely as protection. The manipulation of perception, both internally and externally, became an art form, orchestrated with precision and maintained through fear and uncertainty. Yet behind the paranoia, Hitler was also deeply reflective. Personal entries reveal moments of melancholy, self-doubt, and existential contemplation. The public perception of relentless confidence masks a private man who wrestled nightly with the consequences of his decisions, the morality of war, and the fragility of human loyalty. The war ended, but the secrets remained. Hitler's private world, meticulously constructed and carefully hidden, did not vanish with the fall of Berlin. Some records were lost, burned, or deliberately suppressed, while others emerged decades later, revealing a pattern of control, obsession, and clandestine influence unseen in conventional histories. Historians now understand that many of the decisions once attributed to arrogance, impulsivity, or incompetence were actually calculated, secret maneuvers. Hitler's hidden plans shaped outcomes beyond immediate military victories, influencing alliances, civilian policies, and even post-war geopolitical perceptions. His private obsessions, secret projects, and clandestine manipulations formed a parallel history, largely invisible until recently. The personal diaries, clandestine correspondence, and secret operations collectively reveal a man far more complex than any public portrayal. The hidden Hitler was obsessive, fearful, brilliant, and deeply strategic. His obsession with secrecy, control, and perception left a legacy that extends beyond World War II, forcing historians to reevaluate not just events but motives, methods, and consequences. In the final reflection, the most shocking revelation is this: the man history remembers is only a fraction of the truth. Hitler's hidden secrets, carefully buried and suppressed, hold lessons not just about war, but about human psychology, power, and the lengths one will go to control both action and memory. The hidden history reminds us that truth often lies in shadows, and that understanding the past requires uncovering what was intentionally concealed. As the last pages of his diaries are examined and the full scope of secret operations becomes known, the realization hits: history has never fully confronted the private complexities of Adolf Hitler. And in those hidden corridors, in those carefully locked rooms, a secret world once invisible to historians continues to challenge our understanding of one of the darkest chapters of human history. What was hidden in darkness has finally come into the light, but the questions it raises about power, secrecy, and human nature remain as urgent as ever.